and get, okay, so if you guys are on the witness protection program, you will be recorded. Welcome everybody, we'll get things started here. Thank you guys so much to be here. If you are in the right place, you're here for the workshop for Lincoln County's Community and Economic Development Grant Program. If not, then you can slip away elegantly. And I will get our presentation going here. There's going to be, if you want to be muted, it probably makes good sense during the presentation. If there's a burning question, go ahead and unmute, raise your hand, shout out. That's totally cool. And there'll be a question period at the end. And let me get things going here. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up if folks can see that? Excellent, excellent. Well, welcome. We'll kind of get things started a little bit here. Just to let you know who we are, we're the Economic Development Alliance of Lincoln County. We're a 501c6 nonprofit economic development organization, or EDO, for those who are in lingo land. We've been serving Lincoln County as the Lincoln County EDO for over 29 years. We're governed by a local board of directors. And we've been administering this grant program in partnership with Lincoln County for over 14 years. I'm Paul Skidema, I'm the executive director. We've got Sarah Budding, our project manager. She'll be running some of this. And I'm going to ask you all to, if you can, in the chat, type in your name, your organization, and your email. That'll make it a lot easier for us to shoot stuff off to you. And also folks who are applying to the grant program and attend this workshop get a little buff, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But that way we know who's doing what. So we'll get things kind of rolling here. Our agenda for today, our agenda is we're going to go over a couple things, and this can be pretty fast moving because we respect your time. We'll make sure that we're done by 2:30, but we're going to go over sort of eligibility and the rules overview. They change slightly, the rules change slightly each year based on some of the priorities or things that the Lincoln County commissioners want to see or want to change. We're going to talk a little bit about the timeline for this grant program. It's a pretty quick turnaround program. We're going to talk about the difference between impact grants and standard grants, and it's a little bit different from the last 2 years. We'll go over the sort of scoring review so you have a chance to kind of see about where to put, I guess, your most energy and emphasis. Sarah's going to talk you through some grant application tips. A lot of you have probably already written grant applications, and probably this will be a good review, but it'll also be a little bit related to some of the things that the county commissioners and our board of directors who actually score this grant are going to be looking for. And then we've got a number of documents that we're going to share with you. And we're also going to give you some tips for applying to the grant on Smartsheet, which is the tool that Lincoln County uses. So before we kind of get rolling here, I just wanted to let you know that this grant pool, it's been, as I said, it's been going about 14 years, and it's funded by transient lodging tax dollars and video game dollars going into the county's economic development account, which funds a lot of different things in the county, but that's the pool of funds that's going on here. So let's just dive right in and kind of talk about some of the requirements and the rules. And all of these things are online. And here's what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pop in a couple of bits of information here in the chat, and then we'll get back to that. Just so here's our contact info. And I'm going to give you some links to a number of websites and documents, which is basically the links to the application, the overview page on the county website, eligibility and requirements, the program overview and scoring, and our grant resource page. So those are things that you can actually check out offline or pop into your browser while we're doing this, and then I will hop back on and get back to the presentation. Okay, so talking about the requirements and the rules. The applicants for this program need to be either a governmental unit, a city, a port, a taxing district, things like that, or a registered nonprofit. And as a nonprofit, you can be a C3, C4, C6, or a co-op, or any kind of nonprofit. That's fine. Public-private partnerships are encouraged with this grant program. The way that would work is that the private or for-profit entity would be in partner with a nonprofit applicant who would serve as the fiscal agent, and the grant contract would be with them. You don't necessarily need to do anything specific in the grant application other than indicate that you've got some partners and there's a spot for that. Obviously, only one application per organization per year. And you'll also get a link to this presentation and everything like that. So if you're frantically taking notes, Jeannie, I'm looking at you. It's like you'll have everything here. Also, an organization or governmental unit can only receive an award every other year from this program. But it only means this program. So you can, if you're a nonprofit, apply for the social services grant and the economic development grant, and could potentially be awarded both of those. That's no problem. That is basically just to kind of help distribute the funds to a wider range of organizations. But it's only an award. If you've, like, say, applied last year and didn't get awarded, you could absolutely apply again. If you're a nonprofit rather than a governmental unit, you've got to be in good standing with the IRS and the state. No applicant organization can owe back taxes to Lincoln County. And here is a new rule from the commissioners this year. So I'm calling out a little specifically because it does change the eligibility. Is organizations that currently receive direct contracted funding from Lincoln County are ineligible for this grant program. That's, again, the county commissioners wanting to spread these dollars to go as far as they possibly can. Like every grant, there's no allowed expenditures per the grant prior to receiving the award, so you can't really apply for something that you've already started. If this applies to any of you, and if you could, if you've got your microphone on, if you could mute yourself while we're going here, thank you very much. If your organization is larger than just Lincoln County, serves a larger region, grant awards must be fully spent in Lincoln County for Lincoln County programs and results. So if you represent, say, the Cascades West Economic Development District, you can absolutely apply for this grant, but those dollars have to be spent locally. No grant funds can be used for operational or staffing expenses. This is not an operational grant. This is a project grant. That being said, here's an example of how you can pay for a person from a past grant. We had a successful applicant that was a Chamber of Commerce who wanted to provide websites for chamber members, and they received grant funds and were able to, via contract, hire a web designer to be able to do that work. Contracting expenses for the project work is absolutely fine, but it can't be used to pay rent, utilities, salaries, things like that. The other thing that is, it's been part of this for a while, but we're going to check on it a little bit more, is that the chief executive of the organization must endorse this application. And that's not like an overly complicated thing. There's just a spot at the end of the application that has who that chief executive is, because they may not be the one filling out the application, with their contact information. And part of the due diligence that we do, we'll be checking on that. Um, so all of this is covered in the eligibility document on the county's grant webpage. So there's plenty of places where you can see what's going on here. And I guess I'll pause for a second just to see, because these are the rules before we get into the timeline. Anyone have any questions about those general rules? And also, one thing I will say is, and I'll say this a couple times, our staff job here at EDALC is to help you all create the best applications possible, and we're here to support you. Our board of directors reviews, scores, and makes funding recommendations to the board of commissioners. Sarah and I don't get a vote in that, but if there's questions that you need or questions that you got, just track us down. And now I'll turn it over to, Jeannie, you had a question.
Yes, Paul, thank you. So if we received a grant, I'm looking at the last grant letters that you all sent out on January 12th, 2022. Does that mean we're not applicable this year?
If you received one in the last cycle, yeah, well, if you got the award, if you got a letter, the last letters went out in, I believe, late February or early March in 2023. If you got one from 2022, you are sure eligible.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Kennedy?
Hi, Paul. Can you talk a little bit more about receive direct contracted funding from Lincoln County?
Yeah, there are several organizations, and we don't have the exhaustive list yet. But for example, several chambers of commerce have contracts with Lincoln County that get an annual contracted operational staffing funding from the county and have a contract with Lincoln County. Those are the organizations that are, if you've gotten grant funds in the past, that's not a problem. But it's basically they're wanting to try to spread this funding to different areas and also not have organizations maybe rely a little too heavily on this particular funding. So I think that's the motivation there. Does that answer the question?
Perfect, thank you.
Cool. All right, Sarah, take it away with our timeline.
All right, yeah, the grants are due by 5 p.m. on Monday, December 18th, and they can be submitted, like Paul said, online via Smartsheet through the county's webpage. And if you have any difficulties with that or preparing it at all, please just reach out to Paul and I via email. We will be in the office available till the deadline, so you can call us or email us if you have any technical difficulties with submitting it. And for reference, because we will be posting this online and allowing other applicants to get partial credit if they do watch this online. For them, if you are watching this online, you have until the application deadline to fill out that Google form in order to get partial credit. Everybody here, that doesn't matter, but for those watching online, you have until the application deadline. And so after that deadline on Monday, December 18th, Paul and I will put together all of your applications and give them to our board of directors to review and score them over the next about a month and a half. And they will combine their scores and gather their grant recommendations on our board meeting on February 1st. So those decisions will be made February 1st. And then at the following county commissioner meeting, that's when Paul will give those recommendations from our board to the county commissioners. And then there will have to be the next county commissioner meeting. They will be able to vote on those grant awards and accept them or make other recommendations. And then after that, they will inform the county staff, and notifications will be made to your organization, and contracts will be prepared probably sometime around in March. And a final report for the grant project results and an income statement will be required from the awardees 1 year from the date that your funds were received. And those reports can be submitted to the county via their online grant portal. And the county will also require that awardees of these grants display a county provided sign indicating that your project was funded through this county's grant program, if that's applicable for your project. An example of that was a few years ago, Samaritan got a few EV chargers. And so there's a sign in between both of those that says funded by county economic development funds. So those are the kind of things that would have a sign, but not every project is that's going to work for. But when you receive your award and are notified, you will get all of that information on how to report and how to receive that sign once your award is chosen. So that is the overall timeline. But if you can take anything away, the deadline is Monday, December 18th. So
And hopping in, one funny thing that happened a couple years ago, it's not going to be the problem the last 2 years, but the county had an external company actually do the grant portal, and we never specified whether it was Pacific time, Central time, whatever the time was. And so the grant application actually ran out via Central time, and there were folks actually doing the application when the cutoff happened. Everything worked out okay. The other question that you guys might have is, do the county commissioners, are they obligated to take the recommendations from EDALC's board of directors for funding? In no way are they obligated. Since I've been doing this, they have always taken our recommendations, our board's recommendations. The one exception was, I think 2 years ago, our board recommended maybe, I think, $1,100 of extra funding to kind of go over the pool limit, and the commissioners kind of cut that back down to the even limit. But just let you know that the real folks you got to impress are EDALC's board of directors, and then the county commissioners generally support that work. And we're all kind of on the exact same page and in communication along the way. So we'll move on to standard and impact grants, but one of the things I will say before I get started is keyword one, Dungeness. Why did I say that? Because if you're watching the recording, you will be quizzed. Okay, we have ways of checking. So there are two different grant pools. There's a total of $130,000 for this grant cycle for these local projects. And it's broken into two pools. There's $70,000 for what we call standard grant projects. That's pretty much been what this program's been for the last 14 years, up to a maximum per project of $15,000. If you do the math, you'd notice that 15,000 doesn't evenly go into 70,000 because some folks ask for less. Sometimes our board will make recommendations to adjust some of the funding levels. Then there is also another pool, a $60,000 pool for a single impact grant project. And what's going on here is that the commissioners and our board, this was something that kind of came out together. This is the third year that we're doing these impact grants, is to see if these funds can be used to leverage something that's a little larger scale. The last 2 years, those impact grants, well, the 2 years ago, the impact grants had to be either in the realm of childcare, housing, or broadband. Last year, it was either in broadband or housing because the county has a separate funding channel now to support childcare. This year, it is opened up to any large-scale project. But there is a slight point buff, a little point bonus for projects in the area of broadband and housing, just to indicate that those are priorities of our Lincoln County commissioners. But the project could be about anything. Now, the difference between these pools, other than the dollar amount, is that the standard grant projects, it's project funding. But what folks are looking for ideally is either an impactful single project that can yield meaningful results, or the start of a project that can go forward and then kind of flourish on its own. An example would be like the Beach Bike and Blues festival in Walport was something that was initially funded by this program that is going to be going off and doing things on its own and not getting funding from this program. That was a standard grant. With the impact grants, the larger grants, what we're really looking for is a one-time impact project because it's a little bit larger. The sustainability is not such a big thing. It's can you make an impact with those dollars? And as you can if you kind of think about it, $60,000 doesn't go very far with broadband and housing. But there are some things you can kind of think about with broadband. Could be, purchasing network access points for telehealth or something like that. It's something where you can make those dollars go a long way. The first recipient of the impact grant was Pioneer Telephone Cooperative that used the $60,000, partnered with some of their own money and some other grant funds to bring fiber to, I believe it was 200 businesses and residences in Walport. So you can leverage things as well. So that's really what the difference is. The other thing with the application, and this is sort of the Sophie's choice, but it makes sense when you have to think about your projects, is when you're applying, you have to say, am I applying for an impact or a standard grant? And you can only apply once. So you can't do, I'm going to go for a $60,000 grant, and if I don't get that, here's my $15,000 light version of that. So just kind of think that through. One thing that's pretty clear with this program is we all want it to be not an overly heavy lift, but there is more scrutiny given to that $60,000 larger grant project, just because there's more dollars at stake and they want to see more tangible results. So I guess I will stop there and see if any questions on impact or standard. And again, all of this stuff is going to be in those docs and everything, and we're here for any questions. But just it's kind of a cool way to have different projects come into the same pool of funds and be funded from the same source. All right, then we will blast forward. And we talk a little bit about scoring and evaluation and how this process works, just so you can know what's going on. And I'll give you some hints at what our board looks at. As I said before, our job is to help you create the best application possible. Our board of directors scores the applications and makes funding recommendations. There's one step between there, which is really Sarah and I vet the eligibility of the applicants, just to, we check on the status of the nonprofit. We'll check with the county of are any of these organizations receiving contracted funds, things like that. So we'll turn eligible applicants to our board of directors. The program overview document that was linked in the chat and is on the county webpage goes over the minutia of the scoring. But I guess I will say the one biggest hint I will give on scoring, and in your narrative of your grant, that we'll hit on this a little bit later, is really spin it so that you can tell an economic development story. So I'll kind of go over really quickly here the specifics of the scoring, just so you kind of know how this works. One of the scoring criteria that our board looks at is basically, is this an impactful project in either community and economic development? And they basically, it's a 0 through 4 scale of what the impacts are. And these are the scores that an individual reviewer gives. Then there is an economic development bonus. There's a 0 to 4 point bonus if you can make a very compelling case that this project adds some financial value to the economy of our county, helps its vitality, does it generate revenue, create jobs, help prototype a project, facilitate things happening on the economic development side of things. The next area for scoring is collaboration, and that's 0 to 2 points. And you get some extra points if you have multiple partners with your project. Again, not required, but it shows that if you're being collaborative, you're probably thinking this through and have the potential to have a little bit more of an impactful project. The same is true about your funding sources. There is no requirement for matching funds for this grant program, but if you have multiple funding partners, you can get additional point bonuses. If this grant is the sole funding source, you get no points in other funding sources. If you have one funding partner, you get 1 point. Two funding partners, you get 2 points. Three or more funding partners, you get 3 points. So it just encourages stretching the scale of what you want to do. On the budget, our board scores it from 0 to 4, from basically no budget mentioned, which hardly ever happens, but it has happened, to a very strong, clear, and well-researched budget. And I would say that is one of the strengths of our board members. And if you want to know who's scoring this, you can go to businesslincolncounty.com and go to the About Us page, and our board is there, so you can see who's looking at this grant. But they really want to see a tightly done budget. That doesn't mean complicated. It just means that it's not necessarily guesstimated. And then there's just sort of a general strength of the project. This is a little bit more the interpretation of our individual board members, but does it have an intrinsic value? Is it outstanding? Is it a great idea? And that's basically the core scoring. It's very simple and straightforward. And then there are 4 little, I guess I'm a gamer, so I call them buffs, but little point increments that you can get. If you attended this grant workshop, you get a small little point bonus. The county also ran in November 7th, and we have the list of the attendees, a nonprofit organization workshop. If your organization attended that, we'll know, and you'll get a small point buff. If this project is really clearly a green project that supports sustainability, reducing waste, reusing, recycling, is aware of the energy that it's utilizing and things like that, you'll get a multiple point buff on that. And then the last is if you're doing an impact project, if you are focusing either on broadband or housing, you'll get a 3-point bonus on that. If you're doing a different area, you get no impact bonus at all. And that's really kind of the overview of the scoring. And I guess I would stop here and go, are there any questions about the scoring? Again, this entire rubric, I was just looking at the doc that's on the webpage while I was talking to you. So everything is there. And if you've got any questions, just let us know. And any hands up? Nope. All right, we will move forward, and I'll turn it over to Sarah to tell us how to write an awesome grant.
Thanks, Paul. All right. Yeah, so Paul, after I'd finished talking, is going to send a few links out for some helpful documents for putting together really good applications that we've found. And one of them is called Quick Tips for Grant Writers. And we got this from a grant application guru out of the Idaho Department of Commerce. And there's some really good tips on it, but I'm going to highlight just a few of them in regards to the community and economic application. And the first one is the tip number 2 on there is developing good projects. And Paul kind of hit on this in that the Board of Commissioners created this project or this program to fund community economic projects with a focus on job creation and or retention. So if you can utilize that and know that in developing your project, that'll really help. And also keep the need in mind in the whole development of your project. We really encourage all of you to think about your overall project and initially break it down into tasks and then assign each task to complete that need or project a budget, a deadline, a person in charge, and how its success will be evaluated and done, because this will just make it easier for you to actually develop good projects to achieve the need. And it'll just make it a lot easier and faster to put together your projects in general. And so, again, if you can just keep in mind job creation and or retention and or that community need that you're trying to achieve in the development of your project, that'll really push you forward. The second tip I'm going to go over is number 9 on that sheet, which kind of rolls over in that a good project description will tell the reviewer what you're doing, where, why, how much are you doing, and how you're going to be doing it and measuring it. And it will be done in very plain English. So do it so that the reviewers might not know anything about your organization. Just assume that they don't know any acronyms or industry speak at all. If it can be as concise and clear as possible, it'll be the easiest for the reviewer to really get the impact of what your project is. And if possible, we really recommend having someone from outside your organization proofread your project description, just so you'll know if it's clear and if it can be interpreted by your average person. We also, there's limited space in these project descriptions. I think it's a 500-word max for the standard grants. So try to be as concise and use strong language. There's a lot of information that the reviewers want, but you want to stand out. So you have to be succinct and have colorful, exciting language. And also, we encourage you to use any numbers you can to quantify your need and impact when you can. And to go off that, and Paul kind of hit on this on the last one, triple check your numbers in your budget and make sure that if you have any other references to costs or your project or your budget anywhere else in your application, it matches directly with your actual budget. That's something that you really want to pay attention for. And yeah, the budgets will be scored on viability and completeness. So make sure every single expense that you list is going to be necessary and attributed to a task that will be completing this project. And the grants, again, they're not for operations. So definitely make sure that anything in your budget is necessary to move your projects forward. And so I encourage you all to look at that quick tips for grant writers. It's got some really good info for it. And then we also have another resource that we're going to give you guys is a document of a resource list that's specifically for Oregon nonprofits. And it has some different resources you can find about finding grants, other grants, but also applying for grants and putting together strong applications. And I think Paul is going to send those links in the chat, and they're also all on our Lincoln County or our EDOC website under the grant resources webpage. Both of those, the quick tips for grant writers and the Oregon nonprofit resource, is on that grant webpage. And before I turn it over to Paul, keyword number 2 for those watching online, cranberry. Take it away, Paul.
All right. And yeah, thanks, Sarah. And a couple just other pointers, and this is obvious, but we've seen some grants that it's not obvious. Have someone else proofread your grant before you submit it. And a lot of you know that, but yeah. So one of the things I just wanted to kind of touch on was a couple of examples because we keep hitting on the economic development-ness of it. Obviously, some of these can be community development projects as well, which have less of an economic impact. Those don't get scored as high, but those are still very valuable. But how do you talk about an economic development impact? And I'm going to mention 2 examples just to get your head kind of thinking about it. One is a successful grant application that I kind of mentioned before. A Chamber of Commerce put in an application to have a web consultant do websites for that chamber members' businesses. That was really what the grant was. Well, the economic development impact that you can talk about there is you're making this grant is helping those businesses be more competitive, reach a larger market, and basically sell their wares better, and therefore hopefully bring more money into that business and therefore into Lincoln County. So there's a way that you can kind of talk about that. And another example that's maybe less obvious, and I'm going to pick on Lisa from the Newport Symphony here, is that if you're doing something that's going to enhance the symphony, and how do you spin the economic developmentness of it? Well, I mean, with things like arts and culture, there was just the economic value of the arts in Lincoln County study that was released that shows that someone who goes to an event spends X amount of dollars outside of that event in this area. And if you're creating another event that's going to bring 200 people in, you could say, okay, we have data that shows that each one of those people who is outside of the area is going to be spending this amount of money. So there is a very real economic impact. So those are just some examples of ways to kind of not really spin it, but tell that story. Lisa, your hand's up.
Yeah, so that data that we got from the AE6 study, that's stuff that we can, I guess, that the economic development would be looking at in our applications. Like hard data is okay to use as proof versus other ways of proving economic development.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
and we also realize that a lot of the organizations that apply here are smaller organizations that may not have that necessarily hard data, and it's going to have to be a little bit more anecdotal. And like if you're the example of that Chamber of Commerce doing websites, you're not necessarily going to be able to have a dollar value of how much impact that's going to be. And you can see a person wandering around out behind my office. I hope he's not menacing. But that's going to be a little bit more anecdotal, but you can absolutely make that case. So the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to hop back on here and go to our next little slide, which is actually submitting the grant with Smartsheet. And Smartsheet is basically what it is it's a glorified online Excel spreadsheet that has a form. It's pretty much the same kind of thing as Google Forms and things like that. It happens to be the tool that the county is utilizing. They use this for both the community and economic development grants. They also use it for the social services grants that they do. So one of the challenges with the Smartsheet is that it's not one of those things where you can create an account and go back to your application. It has to be submitted in one go. So the recommendation is obviously go check out the grant application, and it's super simple. It's really straightforward, and then copy those headings into a word processor and put your grant together into a word processor first and write all of that stuff up. That way it's easier to share with your colleagues who are proofing it. You can put everything together and you can have it all ready to copy and paste into Smartsheet. Now, being a former, maybe reformed computer nerd, my next tip, which is down here on using a text editor as an intermediary, one of the worst things in the world to paste from is Microsoft Word. It just has so much gobbledygook in there as far as font information and all that stuff. It's probably going to be fine, but sometimes it might not be. What I generally do if I'm doing something on a web form is I will paste it from Microsoft Word into a pure text editor. Like if you got a PC, it's Notepad. If you got a Mac, it's called Text Edit. Just paste it in there. That strips everything out, all that special stuff, and then you just copy and paste it into the web, and you get no junk in there. So it's just a way to make it a little bit neater. The other thing I would say with Smartsheet is that, especially when you're talking about the budget or the project narrative, give yourself some carriage returns. So there's some space because what Smartsheet's going to do is it's going to cram everything into one cell of a Smartsheet spreadsheet. We extract that back out into a PDF, but if you have some extra carriage returns, it'll make it easier for our board to read. What happens if you don't do that? Well, then Sarah and I get to hang out and read every line of your grant and add some carriage returns. We'll do that to make it easier, because we don't want our board ticked off at us when they start reviewing things. We want it to be easy. The other thing is that when you're doing your budget, do your budget in whatever tool you want to do, whether it's a spreadsheet, Word, it doesn't matter. The budget will be submitted as a PDF document. It will be something that you can click and upload and attach at the end of the application. The reason we did this, we used to have the budget within Smartsheet, but it would put your entire budget within one cell of the spreadsheet, which was completely unreadable. So having it as a PDF, it could look how you want it to look. For the standard grants, the $15,000 or less grants, you are not required to have any letters of support, but you certainly can. For the impact grant, you must have at least one letter of support, and that's in those documents. But the other thing that you'll be uploading is combine, if you have letters of support, one or more, combine those all into an extra single PDF document. So the most documents you'll be uploading will be one spreadsheet and one PDF that has letters of support into it. And there's a spot you just upload both of them and it'll show up on the Smartsheet. We can access them. We can get those off to our board. And that'll be cool. And what I'm going to do right now is just, I'm going to go over and show you the actual grant application, just so we can kind of zoom through that real quickly here, just so you can see what it looks like if you haven't already taken a look at it. It's a very simple form that's just got all your contact information, name of the project, total project budget, what grant pool you're applying for, the amount you're applying for this program, your project description, that's where the carriage returns are good. Funding, if you've got other funding sources, this is not the budget, but this is like, okay, if something, I'm getting $20,000 from Ford Family Foundation, stick that in there. Collaboration, talk about any collaboration that you've got. Viability, it's basically what are the measures of success that you see for this project? What are the key performance indicators? Is this an ongoing project? Is it not? Just comment a little bit about on the viability. You've got your desired start date and completion date. Again, these are a year to perform. You're probably the fastest that you would be getting your money would be probably March of 2024. So when you're kind of thinking that through, there are times when there are extenuating circumstances, like with Pioneer and their impact grant, they had to wait for some equipment. If you aren't going to be able to get your project done within that year, contact us and we can help you kind of craft a little explanation that goes to the county commissioners that could get you some extra time. That hasn't been a problem. You can see where the budget and support letters are. You just click and you can upload those files. And this bottom section is where you're basically certifying, who's ever filling it out, that the chief executive or the grand poobah of your organization at least knows about this application and is cool. So we're just asking for name, title, email. You can talk about what kind of organization you are, and your tax ID. And we will reach out to that chief executive and just say, are you aware that this application is going forward? And then you can click this little thing here that will let you get an emailed copy of your responses. And I guess I would say, with that, any questions about the Smartsheet or any questions in general? One thing I'm going to put up in a link here. That is a link to the presentation we just kind of went through. So you can download that if you want. And now in the last few minutes that we've got, it's your time. If you've got any questions, comments, suggestions, let us know.
Hey, Paul, this is Guy. I had a question in terms of we've been working with other organizations during the past year. Do they count as cooperators, or does it have to
Absolutely.
be? It doesn't have to be in this year exactly.
Right. And what you're doing is you're telling the story of your project. The funding that you're applying for is for this 1 year. So you have to be clear about what that funding is. But if you've been collaborating with other organizations that have either been funding in the past or helping you market the tools or the project or anything like that, put those in there. Let our board know that you're working with other folks on this project. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Sarah.
Hi, and I apologize if you mentioned this. I had to step away for a second earlier. So these funds are not, you're not funding operations or staffing. By operations, just do you mean like if we were interested in applying for like physical infrastructure, like a physical item like
Stuff and
freezer unit or
things.
something, is that operational or like?
No,
Okay.
operational are basically like sunk costs, like your rent, your electricity,
Oh,
your,
I
the
thought that's
contract
what
on
it
your
meant. I
Xerox.
just thought, let me ask real quick. Okay, thank you.
And in the past, I mean, organizations have, they've purchased a door or a piece of equipment. Yeah, so that's absolutely totally kosher and cool.
Thanks.
Anyone else? All righty. Well, then you guys get the gift of time. Wait, Kennedy, you had a question?
Yeah, I just have a question about our specific project for you. If
Okay.
others, okay. Yeah, so it's for the STARS Center, the Samaritan Treatment and Recovery Services. It's for substance use disorder recovery. It's the first one in the county. The county gave us a significant amount of money for it, but we want to apply to the specific grant because it's going to be the first in the county. So it's going to create unique jobs for the county. And I'm wondering, the project is, we bought the building, but the project will take longer than a year. And I'm wondering if you think it would be a good fit or your thoughts on that.
I mean, I guess I would say the easiest solution would be if that project could be phased, and so there could be a certain amount that can happen within that year. I think that would probably be the best way to go, but know that there's probably the ability to have some wiggle room, but the commissioners, due to all of their financing and trying to deal with audits, they don't want it to go like multiple years and things like that. And it's always, I mean, I think you already are hearing that you can tell your story with an economic development spin of, either supporting and improving an incumbent workforce or adding new folks into the workforce through the program works, things like that. That would be absolutely great.
Perfect.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much. And remember that we are here to help you and be your advocates over the next couple of weeks. So hit us if you've got any questions. When this is done, we will send you all the link to the recording if you want to share it with any of your coworkers or anything like that, and the chat. So you've got the addresses for everybody who's there. And if anyone you know of is thinking of applying for this and they weren't at this workshop, let them know that they can watch it online. And if they do watch it online, we give them the link, and then we give them a little quiz that they can take online to see if they actually listen to the keywords. It's not totally secure, but at least they can jump through some hoops. So thank you guys very much. Good luck to you. We can't wait to see the projects that you guys come up with. And we're here for you. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.